I wanted to make this video because as we continue to go on, new things come out, new phones are developed, released, reviewed, and I just think it's interesting that yes, certain brands get all the attention while other ones don't. Certain brands get kind of ridiculed while other ones are either always praised or they always come with different caveats of, oh, well, it's this because of that, or it's this because of that. And the main two brands that I think are the iPhone, or so Apple, and the Galaxy, Samsung. But what I'm really not, I don't want to say bothered because that's not the right word, but I find it very intriguing is that as the iPhone 15 Pros came out this year, really last year, back in 2023, and the iPhone 16s will come out later this year, there are certain things about both of those devices that we've seen other places. And of course, it'll be on Android, so not on the iPhone, but Android devices come with a bevy of different features and different implementations that, yes, benefit users. And what I hate personally is when, for instance, the biggest YouTube tech reviewer on the planet says certain things that discredit a company's ingenuity, if you even want to call it that. And no, I'm not some type of Sony enthusiast, as he would say. It's just there's good and there's bad. There's good implementation, there's bad implementation. There's innovation, if you want to call it that, and there's, what's the word that I'm looking for? I guess just trying. That's really what it boils down to. It's, hey, we're a company. We're worth either billions or in Apple's case, trillions of dollars. And some of the things that they release are either just complete knockoffs of what somebody else already implemented. And some might say, well, when Apple does it, they do it better, whatever. Or they just don't give consumers valuable stuff. They'll give you what they think you need as opposed to something that's truly meaningful. So this whole video is really just about, I want to say, two buttons. It really was about one button. And now it'll be about two or three buttons that will be coming or already on the iPhone, but we have seen those other places. And I would just like to get somebody else's perspective on this entire atmosphere. Also, as the biggest YouTube tech reviewer will point out, having a button like that is it's an enthusiast feature. But is it still an enthusiast feature now that it's going to be on the iPhone? So I'm curious to hear what he'll say about the iPhone later this year when it comes out. And now that it will have almost all the same buttons as the Sony phones he's calling enthusiast phones, what is he going to call them? So I'm curious. Let's hear what he has to say. I don't like showing a ton of other people's videos, but I just think that it's interesting. And in addition to the buttons, there are a few other things that he calls enthusiast features that I just find extremely interesting.
Hey, what's up? I'm KBHD here. And I think Sony's finally done it. This mountain they've been climbing for all these years, they finally reached the top and they've created the most enthusiast targeted phone in the world. More than any gaming phone, more than any other niche phone, and everything that you can think of that would make the ultimate enthusiast phone, they've done it. So first of all, it has a super nice frosted matte black finish. And it's actually even kind of like a little bit of a soft touch that I really like. Even the sides are matte black. But then let's just go down the feature list, okay? Dual SIM card tray at the top, removable without a tool. And the second SIM card tray actually doubles as expandable storage for those micro SD cards up to 1 terabyte. You're welcome, enthusiasts. There's stereo front-facing speakers flanking the edge of the phone, and they're nice and loud, louder than the previous generation, and far enough apart to create a nice real stereo image. And then up in the corner, yeah, that's an LED notification light, a feature you really don't see in many features nowadays, but that enthusiasts will appreciate. And as I say that, you're probably already thinking about a headphone jack. So yeah, the headphone jack is up here too, up top. Feels like the phone is barely thick enough for it. And this phone actually also has some extra buttons. So there's a volume rocker up top, then the super reliable fingerprint reader power button combo underneath that, then a custom button that's mapped to trigger Google Assistant, then underneath that, a dedicated shutter button for the camera system. And it's got the half press for focusing and the full press for actually taking the shot and everything.
Yeah, I'm going to talk with this shirt over my face because there's a little bit of AV sync issue going on here. So the microphone is over here for the Mac that I'm using, and then the videos is this camera. So I'm just going to keep this on my face while I'm talking here because it actually becomes a little bit distracting. And I can imagine this is distracting as well, but we're going to deal with it. So what I wanted to, I guess, point out, and it's, you know, his opinion, whatever. And, you know, they're based off of factual things about the phone, but I took a few notes while he was talking. And the first thing he points out is the color of the phone, that it's matte black. Now, he says a few other things after saying that it's matte black, but I still am going to allude, or I think he's alluding to the fact that a matte black phone is an enthusiast phone. Now, for those of you who might recall, the iPhone 7 had a matte black phone. So here is an iPhone 7 right here. So I'm just curious, does he think that this is an enthusiast phone as well because it's matte black? I mean, yeah, it does feel good. And the sides, the sides are matte as well. So him describing the Sony, or I'll say calling out the fact that the Sony is matte black, I'm confused. I really am. And this is the second time I've kind of made a video about this, but it's the first time that now we have these additional buttons on the iPhone. So I think it requires a little bit of revisiting. The next thing he points out is the fact that the phone offers dual physical SIM cards as well as an option for an SD card. And the beautiful thing about that is the fact that you don't need a SIM ejector tool to remove the SIM card. So we all know those little things where you poke them. In fact, I probably have one over there. But it's nice to be able to just open the phone without additional tools. So here we have an older Sony phone. And yeah, you just take it. And I actually have an SD card in there. And it comes right out. So it's simple. Now, this is a single SIM model. This phone came out quite a while ago. But it's nice to be able to pull that out without the need for a tool. Also, he mentioned the fact that there was expandable storage. How is that an enthusiast thing when it's just good design? Why pay Apple or Samsung or Google or any of these companies $100 extra for what? Maybe 64 additional gigs or even an additional 128 gigs, depending on who it is that you're buying the phone from, when you can just go buy your own SD card. I mean, this is old, so this is a 64 gig chip, and it probably cost me, I don't know, $20 at most when I actually bought it. And the good thing about this is, let's say next year or in 2 years, when I get another phone, instead of having to pay the phone vendor again for that additional upgrade in storage capacity, I can take the SD card with me that I've had this entire time and just put it in the new phone. So I don't get how that's an enthusiast feature. That's just good design. And of course, the issue is when you have people like this saying it's an enthusiast thing, it's giving the $3 trillion companies the okay to keep doing it. Not that they would stop because they're going to do what they want to do, but it also almost infects the consumer to think the exact same way that, oh, well, yeah, it makes sense that we don't have SD card slots anymore, or some phone vendors never put them in to begin with. So I'm just trying to understand, if this phone came out back in 2016, maybe even 15, I know I got it in 16, would this have been considered an enthusiast phone of the time? Or are the features of the phone now enthusiast features because the big companies took them away and then certain companies kept them around? So now it's, oh, this is an enthusiast device, even though it used to kind of just be the standard. So as I mentioned, this phone I got back in 2016. There are stereo front-facing speakers on it. So again, does that make this an enthusiast phone? Absolutely not. It's just good design. So yeah, it's nice when I'm sitting and watching videos, even back in 2016, pull up YouTube or whatever I'm watching and sit there and enjoy everything that I'm watching and having those dual front-facing speakers. Now, mind you, I want to say, and maybe I'll put it on the screen, whatever. When I had my iPhone 5C, I believe, that had a single downward firing speaker. And I think I got that phone around the time that I got, maybe a little bit before. So we're talking the same era of smartphone. And because Sony decided to do something and has since stuck with it, dual front facing speakers, it sounds like Sony was just doing something good this entire time. Whereas iPhone or Apple was simply just doing something, giving you the bare minimum. Yes, a single downward firing speaker. We all know the struggle of you holding the phone like this and you covering that speaker. So you might, turn the phone and, now it's facing that way. But either way, it's still not facing you and you only have one speaker. But that downward firing speaker is still prevalent today in all smartphones for the most part. The only difference is now you'll have that secondary speaker up here at the top. So technically you do have dual speakers, and I guess technically stereo speakers as well. They're just not front facing. So the audio is fine. But again, he pointed it out that having dual front facing speakers is an enthusiast request. But this phone has it. And this phone came out, 8 years ago now, maybe even 9, again, depending on if it came out in the beginning of 2016 or towards the end of 2015. And not to say that the phones prior to this might have had had similar specs, similar features, and nothing that I'm saying right here, is special about Sony back in 2016. I mean, with the exception of the toolless removable SIM card, I don't know if I've seen any other device manufacturers do that, but dual front facing speakers, that's just good design. Oh, and I don't know if you can see it. Let's see if it pops up. There it is. So right on this side of the phone, there's a little LED flash. Oops, sorry. On this side of the phone, there's a little LED flash. So that's just letting you know that notifications are waiting. And he points it out as an enthusiast feature, which, yeah, it is an additional piece of hardware. For this particular phone, I don't think there's any type of customization that can go into it. You can't change the color. I don't think you can change the blink pattern or anything. So it just does the job, and it's nice that if your phone is sitting down like this, of course you can't see it, but if it's sitting down like that and you walk by and you see, oh, it just flashed, hey, I can pick up my phone and do something. I know nowadays, you can double tap to wake it or whatever, and then with certain variations of always on displays, you'll see whether or not you have notifications. But I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the big three. So whether it's Samsung, not Apple, I think Google might be doing it, and I don't know if I can count them as a big three. But one of the larger companies in the smartphone realm, I think they now have the LED flash on the back that allows you to see whether or not you have notifications, and I think you can even change the colors of that LED. So is it an enthusiast feature on these other devices? I don't think it is. I just think, again, it's good design. Yes, a little extra piece of hardware right there, that little LED, but it's nice. And yes, this phone, again, came out in 2016. So was it an enthusiast feature back in 2016? Well, I don't think so. And we all know the one that sucks the most is the fact that these phone vendors took away the headphone jack. Now, the iPhone had it all the way up until the 6S. And then, yes, with this iPhone 7, they took away the headphone jack. So that definitely sucks. I don't remember if the Pixels, I know the A series Pixels had them, and I don't remember for the non-A series. I feel like the first couple might have had. No, the Pixel 2 did not, because I had one. And I don't recall about the Pixel 1. But the A series ones did have headphone jacks. Apple has removed, Google has removed those, I believe. And with the Galaxies, yes, they had headphones or headphone jacks, and Samsung has since removed those as well. Not an enthusiast feature by any means. Okay? There's nothing wrong with giving the user the option to plug in a pair of headphones. It doesn't have to be Bluetooth everything. And it's just that simple. We don't need wireless everything. And like I say, this phone came out in 2016 or 15. The phone he was talking about was, I don't know, a couple years ago. I mean, yeah, we got the Sony Xperia 1 Mark V is out now. So if you're talking about the 3, let's just say 2 years ago. But I always, phone almost slid off the bed right there. I always pull out my Asus Zenfone 9 here, which came out last year, or really 2 years ago now. And I actually have a Zenfone 10 over there, and they both have headphone jacks. So not an enthusiast phone by any means. It's just a compact Android phone. And the designers of the phone said, you know what some people still use and what doesn't really take up that much space and there's no reason to actually remove it? A headphone jack. So by no means is it an enthusiast feature. Now, there are 2 buttons that he calls out that are different from what we're used to. Yes, he talks about the volume rocker, which, yeah, all phones have those. And then he talks about the side power button right here, which also doubles as a fingerprint reader. So on this Zenfone 9, side power button, illuminate the screen and not. And it's locked right now. And boom, unlocked. Okay, so locked, unlocked. So super reliable. Another reason why Face ID on the iPhone is not where it needs to be, because all the time I'm swiping up and it's not recognizing my face. Obviously, I'm not covering it, but just see how reliable it is. When screen is dim, I'll just illuminate it. It's still locked, unlocked. So super reliable. Another thing, and we'll bring this up later, but since I'm talking about the power button now, I'll just mention it now. Another feature of this button is the fact that you can swipe down. So swipe down, and now you have information. So your notification shade comes down. So again, swipe down, see everything that you need right there, and back up. And that is something that we'll mention later in the video as well. But the actual buttons he was talking about, and sorry, I got a little off track. I'm glad I wrote everything down, is he said that there was a custom button. And for the Sony, it happened to be mapped to, I think, Google Assistant, which regardless of what the device manufacturer chooses to map it to, because even on this phone, even though there's not a additional dedicated button, let me go ahead and unlock it again. I can double tap and it opens the camera. Okay, so the device manufacturer said, hey, some people might want to use this button for something else. Now, I have it opening the camera. I can choose for it to open a different app because it's all about what makes the most sense for the user, not what do we think it's supposed to do. So yeah, that Sony that he mentioned had an additional button. And I think the Sony's power button can be double tapped or triple tapped, and you can have an app or a camera app open. But for that customizable button, what that sounds like to me is the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max's action button. So something else that's coming to the phone many years later. Okay, many years later, the iPhone is now having a button that you can map it to do something besides just lock or unlock the phone. Now, the one thing I will say with the iPhone, if you double tap the side button, power button, whatever you want to call it, it does allow you, or it does map to Apple Pay if you are using it. But the iPhone has given us the action button, and we'll do what we can with the action button. The last thing that he mentions is the dedicated shutter button. Now, again, we'll talk about that some more in a little bit. But on the Xperia 1 Mark, whatever that one was, or 5, they all have it. Again, this phone came out back in 2016. So you're not going to be able to see all the buttons, but the silver one, that's the power button. Down here, this is the volume rocker. And look, there's another button. So if you long press it, it opens the camera. And if you press it, it takes a picture. So again, I can't reiterate the fact that him calling these things enthusiast features at this point really are just in Sony's DNA more than anything else. But as we see, and we'll talk about that shutter button in a little while, these are features that are just part of a phone These are features that have been part of a device manufacturer's DNA. And now we're starting to see the big guy, Apple, just copy. Which, to a certain extent, there's only so much you can do. But at the same time, don't call it an enthusiast feature just because it's not the most popular feature or just because the biggest company isn't doing it right now. So let's take a look at what the iPhone 16 is going to look like.
We just got some brand new information on one of the iPhone 16's killer new features. The capture button, which is a feature or a thing that we have known about for some months now. Ever since iPhone 16 stuff started to leak, we've been hearing that the entire lineup, from base model iPhone 16 up to the Pro units, are all getting this capture button. What have we known about it? Well, that it's gonna capture something. But capture what? The Pokemon? Small mammals? I don't know. Maybe some photo and video? Gonna go with the last one. Back in December, Bloomberg's Hobbit turned Apple analyst, Mark Gurman, confirmed just that the capture button is for video. Wow, so brave. I would have never guessed. Okay, great, you're all caught up. Info, that's my nickname for them now, I just made that up, tells us that the capture button will actually be mechanical, not capacitive like all the leaks have been saying since forever. But they say it will still have the technology that makes it able to respond to pressure and different types of touch. For instance, Info tells us that users will be able to zoom in and out by swiping left or right on top of the capture button itself. It could also tell the camera to focus by pressing lightly, and actually start a recording by really giving the button to business and pressing it down with the force of God. As that sounds, as complicated as that sounds, we're still expecting the capture button to be across the whole lineup. iPhone 16, iPhone 16 Plus, iPhone 16 Pro, iPhone 16 Pro Max. Ultra? I don't know. Okay, so first of all, other than just being another button for us to accidentally press, I actually think this is a good idea.
Now, he mentioned what I've been talking about before or earlier in this video, is that the iPhone 16, all of them, so the regular, the Plus, the Pro, and the Pro Max, are going to get a capture button. Now, as I've already shown you, this little button right here, so the only button that I'm pressing is right here at the top, and I'm putting my thumb down at the bottom just to add some support. But you press it, and it opens the camera. Press it again, takes a picture. And if you look ever so, I'm applying just a little bit of pressure, and it is attempting to focus on my face. Now let me get a little closer. See that? So you press it, and it's focusing. Now if I press it, takes the picture. Good. Press it lightly, focus. So everything that he's saying has already been done. And I think the big issue, and in fact, before I get into my little after action rant, he also talked about the fact that you'll be able to interact with the button by swiping left and right. Now, on this particular phone, there were some patent issues back in 2016, 17. So this little button right here, the fingerprint reader is not active with the firmware that's installed on this particular device. Now, when it does work, because at one point in time I did install the firmware, and yeah, it was reliable, the same way that it is reliable on this. And I do not remember if when I installed that firmware, if I gained any additional functionality. And for the newer Sony phones, it wouldn't surprise me if that side fingerprint reader did allow for additional stuff, like, I double pressed it and it opened. It would not surprise me if it allowed for additional stuff like swiping the way that this one does. So you swipe down, and again, I know I've already shown you all this, but that's something else that he mentioned, that this new capture button, which again is available on a phone that's almost a decade old, combined with tech that, this phone is 2 years old, but being able to swipe down on the fingerprint reader is not a new thing. Now, going back as far as the Pixel 2, maybe even the Pixel 1, but I think with the Pixel 2 as well, yes, it had a rear-mounted fingerprint reader, and I believe with that, you could swipe down, and then it would bring down a notification shade. And the only reason I bring that up, and I know there are other phones that have done it as well, is that this idea of being able to interact with the button in a swiping manner is a new thing. And just because it's going to be on the iPhone, now people, oh my God, it's so new. And you hear his excitement. It's almost a decade old technology, buddy. Like I said, this came out 2016 or 15. This has been there for a while. However, this been there for a while. So, in closing, I think my biggest gripe with all of this is the fact that, yeah, these huge platforms. So Marquez Brownlee has over 18 million subscribers, and that's just on YouTube. So I don't know what he's looking like on Twitter or on Instagram or any of the other platforms. John Prosser, not as many, but, he has almost 500,000. And we have a tech reviewer, and we have a person who delivers tech news. So that vastly different jobs that they perform on YouTube and other platforms. But I feel that the information that they give is part their opinion, but then also part just factually wrong. And whether you want to call it incorrect or just incomplete, it's all right. This phone that's doing something is an enthusiast phone. It's enthusiast because a lot of people don't buy them. However, now the company that everybody buys their phones, at least in this country, is going to start doing the same thing. Is it still going to be an enthusiast feature? We'll find out. But the iPhone, and I will always say this, the iPhone is not a good product. It's a sometimes convenient product. And at this point, I really feel like the top three, so Tim Cook and the other two, they know that they don't have, I don't know if that'll pop up. They know that what they have is not a good product. I mean, yes, things work seamlessly with each other when you are in the Apple ecosystem, like this Mac and the iPhone. Like, yeah, it works well, but it's still lacking in a lot of stuff. And the Mac is fine. This isn't a video to shame the Mac. It's not even a video to shame the iPhone, even though I did just say it's not a good product. It's more so of the user should know that what Apple brings to the table is usually older technology. Some of the stuff is revolutionary, like the chip in the iPhone 15 series, or I'll say the iPhone 15 Pros. Yeah, 3 nanometer and some other stuff. But everything else is just like, oh, it's cool. So what's the one thing right now that Apple is so desperately trying to hold on to? iMessage. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that is the last thing for iPhone. And I'm obviously not going to play the rest of John Prosser's video, but he's talking about the fact that he thinks that this is the beginning of the end of iPhone. And I kind of agree too, that as things slowly start getting chipped away in terms of their level of control, hopefully consumers start seeing there's a better alternative out there. And when it comes to the mobile industry, yeah, right now in this country, it's really only Android. And even I think whatever's happening in China, technically I think it's just Android, and they've, put a skin over it or something for all of the vendors. And even for whatever OS, I think somebody or one of the companies actually tried to make up. But yeah, in that industry, it's Android or iOS. And I feel Android is just the vastly superior operating system, not just because it's all about customization or whatever, but that's a part of it, but it's also just choice. You should be able to choose what you want to do. So as I said, iMessage is still what Apple's holding on to. We saw what just happened over in the EU. Well, they weren't labeled a gatekeeper or something, so they don't have to make it interoperable. But RCS should be coming to the iPhone later this year, which I'm sure Apple's going to kneecap it, but that's at least some progress. The Lightning port, which we all loved initially and then grew to hate as time went on, is now gone. The iPhone 15s now have USB-C. FaceTime, you can technically send a FaceTime link to somebody else who has an Android device or a Windows device. But with FaceTime, there's so many other video conferencing options that I don't think FaceTime truly was ever that much of a hold. It is convenient. And when, all of your friends have iPhones. It's nice to be able to jump on a group FaceTime if that's something that you're interested in doing. But I think iMessage and them removing the SIM card slot is another way of trying to keep their customers locked in. So I think that's all that I wanted to say. That this Sony does not make enthusiast phones. Sony makes good phones. Apple makes fine. I mean, the phone is fine from a hardware perspective. Yeah, it's fine, but it's nothing special. But Apple has good business people leading that company, and they've done what they can to make sure you as a customer stay with them and ignore all of the other options that are out there. So, in closing, and I always attempt to close multiple times, the iPhone is not great. And even when it comes to this Mac, while I enjoy the hardware, I don't as much care for the software. So as RCS comes to the iPhone, I will probably go back to only using Android. And as ARM Windows PCs become more prevalent, I will probably ditch these Macs. So we'll see what happens. Again, stuff that's coming to the iPhone 16 was available on this phone back in 2016. iPhone 16, 2016.